Hello and welcome to another episode of Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again. I have this episode selection right here. It's a big one. And the thing I want to talk about, because my shirt reminded me of it, was what is the most dangerous thing that you've ever done? Not necessarily the most dangerous situation you've found yourself in, because like we've all had things happen to us, been in car crashes or whatever. But I want something that you've like deliberately taken a part in. At least maybe you didn't know how dangerous or scary it was going to be, but you at least got yourself into it, right? So for me, I think it's probably jumping out of a plane, which I've done twice, was with a parachute. And it was tandem, because I didn't quite trust myself to be in charge of all those things by myself. And the first time I did it was with this charity organization, Blame Drew's Cancer, which was really just a lot of fun to be involved in. It was to raise fundraising for cancer charities, but also awareness that cancer was something you could talk about. You could talk about the impact that it had on your life, other people's lives, and that it's just a terrible, terrible thing. And so I went up into a plane at 14,000 feet with my fellow directors at Blame Drew's Cancer, and we all jumped out of a plane together. And then I did it again later to celebrate my friend Wes graduating from law school. So those are the two times that I've jumped out of planes. I'm trying to think if I've ever done anything really deliberately dangerous other than jumping out of planes. I used to be like a little bit more of an adrenaline junkie when I was a kid, and I liked, you know, like roller coasters and parasailing and all that stuff. But now, ever since I started playing guitar, I've been much less into anything that like kind of throws my body around, because I'm like really sensitive about my hands and my elbows and my arms. Like even riding my bike sometimes, I'm like, I gotta have wrist pads now. So I've turned into sort of an old fogey in that respect. And I don't know if there's a lot of more hyper dangerous things that I'm planning to do in my life. I probably will go like do some sort of like diving, scuba or something here in New Zealand, but that's not, I don't think, as dangerous as skydiving. I do kind of want to go skydiving again here in New Zealand because it's gorgeous, and part of the fun is just seeing the scope of the world from up that high as you descend, but it's also really windy here, and that probably makes skydiving a little bit more tricky. So skydiving, I think, is my answer. I have friends who are really into like learning how to drive well, like defensive driving, and they all know what it's about when they talk to each other. One of them's like, oh, I went to the BMW defensive driving course. The other one's like, oh, that's so cool, I've always wanted to go. So I guess not everything has to be like leaping out of something. You can do things on the ground that are dangerous too. Okay, so today we have my final 2 volumes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer for us to unwrap today. This is Buffy Library Edition of Season 8, number 1 and number 2. Love these covers. I mean, the likeness that they get of these characters is just so right on. So great. So I know I've kind of spoken ad nauseum about my love for Buffy and season 8 and how Buffy got started, and so I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a cheat that these are the last ones to open up. But let's talk about where we left off. So Buffy season 7, which was on the TV, back when TV shows were on actual broadcast television, the concept of this season was that they'd done something to trigger many different potential slayers being found, and that also the bad forces of the Buffy world were trying to kill all of these potential slayers. They didn't have the full-on slayer powers yet, but they were identified as potentials, and that's what they called them, potentials, that could replace Buffy or Faith if either of them died. And the season kind of follows Buffy amassing a little army of these girls in her house, and eventually they shut down the Hellmouth, maybe permanently, and seal it off. A lot of their friends, you know, die or are hurt. And Buffy's kind of, and the way that they do it is they have this axe, which originated in a comic book that Joss Whedon wrote in the far future of Buffy, I believe called The Fray, and then the axe, you know, we find out how it originated in the Buffy series. So Buffy has the axe, Willow does a spell and causes the axe's power to like multiply Buffy's power, but also spread Buffy's power to every potential slayer ever. So there's not just one slayer anymore. And this picks up after that. And you have to ask yourself, like, where do you go from Buffy and kind of the entire town of Sunnydale being destroyed and having this army of potential slayers? Like, how do you even get anywhere from that? And so this opens up with Buffy having like a paramilitary force almost here. And she's turned into, like, honest to goodness, a real life superhero. And so the first issue here is them like slam bang, breaking into a castle, fighting a big demon. They've got guns and are dropping out of helicopters. It's something that we never really thought we would get Buffy doing. But then the other thing that happens is you don't exactly explode a major US city, or even a minor one, and not have any consequences. And so the government is kind of looking into what is now this giant crater in the ground and saying, what has Buffy done? So as we go on, we kind of find out that the gang's still all together. They've decamped to this castle. Xander is like quite literally the general in this army now, and Buffy is mobilizing them against other supernatural forces all around the globe. The question, and you really could ask, is like, would Joss Whedon have really done this? Like, if Sarah Michelle Gellar was like, no, I really want to keep doing the show, if the budget was there, if it was worth renewing, were we going to get paramilitary Buffy? Like, would he have blown up Sunnydale? And I think part of that comes with, it's Buffy in the real world. Like, Buffy started as a sophomore in high school, the same year that I was a sophomore in high school. So we got her 3 high school years, and then we got her 4 college years. Now, she didn't ultimately graduate college because she had some other stuff going on in her life, and I don't know if any of the characters graduated. Did Willow graduate college? Anybody? Can anybody tell me if Willow graduated college? But the 4 years kind of represented their college career. So thematically, the thing that Whedon is doing here is trying to say, like, there's a big, wider world out there. And yes, the wider world is Buffy being like a general of the army, but it's also to indicate like the experiences that you have after you leave home when you have to go and grow up. And part of growing up is being responsible for other people, not necessarily having kids right away, but maybe you became a teacher, maybe you're at a business and you're responsible for the money that people are paying that business and using that money to good ends. And that's the difference. A part of the difference between being a college student and being an adult is that you're playing in a world that has very real stakes and you're making your future success. So I think that theme is here. But also, as I've spoken about before, there's a lot of fun in just showing things that we could not show on the television. And this first volume is not so much in those things other than the dropping from the helicopter, but also that Dawn, as I've mentioned in the past, is a giant now. But we also get Faith and Giles and see Faith kind of be sent out on her own undercover missions that nobody is really aware that she's involved in. There's a great cover of her drowning Buffy, although that's more of a metaphorical drowning, if I remember correctly. Yeah, she's sent undercover to infiltrate this woman. I forget if she has Slayer powers or if she's just like magical, and Faith is like pretending to be her bestie because she's trying to disrupt everything. And actually that scene does literally happen in the comic book. And this is a good example of the actual interior artist catching a pretty good likeness here. I think that's a pretty good Sarah Michelle Gellar likeness. So there was a lot of excitement when this came out. I remember, because we were all Buffy fans, were huge Buffy fans, and it had been since 2003, I guess, since she had been on television. This started in 2008, and I remember like when you heard that it was coming out, there was just this like seismic rumble of like, oh my gosh, there's going to be new Buffy, and then you started to see the covers, and they looked so cool. And then I had friends who had the trade paperbacks, and I would go over to their house and read them, but it's turned Buffy into one of these eternal franchises, right? Like there's a difference between a TV franchise that occasionally comes back for more, and with movies or TV movies or reunion specials or different kinds of media, and something that has just become perpetual. The Avengers are perpetual. There's always been an Avengers comic book. There's always been an X-Men comic book, at least since 1974. Fantastic Four now are just on a break for the first time from between 1961 and 2015. And Buffy now feels like maybe it might be something that's happening in perpetuity. We got season 9, season 10 is finished, and we'll get library editions of those soon. They're on season 11 now. And so the question is like, is it just going to keep going in perpetuity? Is there some diminishing point of return where the comic book stops being a good idea and we just get like periodic graphic novels, or are we going to have Buffy forever? And, you know, we've seen some other indie comic books go in that direction, or at least, if not graphic novels, limited runs punctuated by much longer gaps in time. And that's like the Hellboy model. And then in terms of graphic novels, Astro City, a very long-running indie comic book from Kurt Busiek, has recently announced they're not going to be doing single issues anymore. They're going to be doing graphic novels. So part of my question for the future of Buffy is, are we still going to see these seasons that have individual issues? I don't even know if it makes sense. It seems like to me you could have each season be a series of 2 or 3 graphic novels that, you know, were 2 or 3 story arcs, and just have graphic novels and graduate them right up to the library editions and probably do fine. And then the question is, like, do you need the capital of the people buying the single issues, or can you get enough capital just by that same quantity of people buying graphic novels? But that's a different conversation. So that is Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8, library editions 1 and 2. Now up here, it's a little bit above camera. I guess I could like tip back the camera. Oh boy, here's a first. We're gonna move the camera. It's up there. We're going to shelve it up there and have a complete Buffy Library Edition shelf. So here comes the ceremonial shelving of Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8 Library Editions 1 and 2. If they fit. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I have never had them on a shelf before because I was already like boxing things at the point that I got the season 9 hardcover, so I've never seen them all lined up. That's really fun. Part of this is, I know it's like a little underemphasized sometimes because I'm so glib about it, but it's really gratifying to see all these books on the shelf, not just because I like to collect things, but because I love these books. If I didn't love them, I'd get rid of them. And so I really love a lot of the stuff that's up here, and it's really fun to be able to walk into this room and see it all. And I really look forward to being all done and be able to zoom the camera out and back so that you can see the full grandeur of everything shelf. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Crushing Comics and helping me fall in love with my comic book collection all over again. I will see you again next time.